My name is Thomas, and I thought I had the perfect life for the past 12 years. I had a wife, Jane, who I thought loved me. Two beautiful children who made every struggle worthwhile. A home filled with laughter and warmth. If you had asked me back then, I would have told you that I was one of the fortunate ones. That I had created something tangible and unshakable. However, life has a way of proving you wrong at the most unexpected times. See, betrayal is more than just cheating. Sometimes it's about living a lie without realizing it. It's about waking up one day and realizing that the life you've spent the last decade creating was never truly yours to begin with. I know many of you watching have been in relationships. Some of you are married, have children, and believe you know your partner intimately. That's what I used to think. But, after what happened to me, I realized that trust is more than just love. It's all about proof. Because no matter how much you love someone, if they are keeping something from you, you are living a lie. When I'm done telling you this, you'll understand why I left the life I thought I wanted. You'll raise questions you never considered before. And perhaps, just maybe, you'll see the danger of blindly trusting, as I did. Let's get to it. Jane and I met in university. We were both young, ambitious, and full of big ideas. We clicked almost right away, and by the time we graduated, I knew she was the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. We married 1 year after graduation. We started our lives together from scratch, progressing from two broke college graduates to homeowners with a family. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but I never doubted our foundation. I never suspected anything. If someone had told me back then that my entire life was based on a lie, I would have laughed in their face. The truth, however, does not care how perfect your life appears to be. It doesn't care if you're happy. It just waits, silent, patient, and inevitable, until everything comes crashing down. One morning, I awoke with no reason to think anything was wrong. I was off work for the day, and since the kids were on break from school, I figured we'd just relax at home. Jane needed to go to work. Her job did not allow her to work flexible hours, as mine did. So it was just me, Daniel, and Ella in the house. I made them breakfast, and we spent the morning watching cartoons, laughing at silly jokes, and simply spending time together. Around noon, something happened. Daniel was sitting on the couch, playing with his toy car, and then he collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. At first, I thought he had tripped or was joking, but then I noticed how his body tensed up. His breathing was short and shallow. Panic hit me extremely hard. I'd never seen him like this before. My hands shook as I dashed over, calling his name and hoping for an answer, but he didn't respond. I can't even remember how I put my shoes on, or grabbed my car keys. Everything became blurry. I scooped Daniel up into my arms, barely feeling his weight. Ella, who had been looking around with wide, terrified eyes, burst into tears. She begged me to not leave her alone. I could not. She was a little girl who had just witnessed her brother collapse. So I took both. I grabbed his hand with one arm while carrying Daniel with the other, dashed to the car, and accelerated toward the hospital. I kept checking the rearview mirror, watching Daniel in the back seat, hoping he wouldn't stop breathing before we arrived. When we arrived, I screamed for help. Nurses rushed over and quickly had Daniel on a stretcher, wheeling him away while asking me questions. What happened? How long had he been doing this? Did he have any medical issues? I responded as best I could, but my brain was barely functional. I kept pacing the hallway, clutching my phone and debating whether to call Jane at work. I didn't want to alarm her until I knew what was wrong. After what seemed like an eternity, a doctor emerged and informed me that they had stabilized him. I let out a breath. I had no idea what I was holding. However, before I could fully process my relief, the doctor said something that caused my stomach to tighten. We need to know his genotype. I frowned at his genotype, but I had never given it much thought. But I knew Jane and I were both A, so our kids needed to be able to write basic genetics. However, something about the doctor's tone made me hesitant. It wasn't a casual question. There was some weight to it. I said AA, but I felt uneasy about it. The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he sensed something in my hesitation. Are you certain? The way he asked caused my chest to tighten. I'd never actually checked. I'd just assumed. I opened my mouth to confirm again, but the words didn't feel right on my tongue. The doctor sighed, his face unreadable. To be safe, we'll run a genotype test. I did not argue. I just nodded. I remember sitting in the hospital chair, waiting for the doctor to return with the results. I wasn't nervous when the doctor finally walked in, holding Daniel's results on a clipboard. I had no reason to be. This was just routine. This is just a precaution. But then he looked up at me. Your son's genotype is, as he stated, calm and professional. I blinked. Initially, The words did not make sense. That cannot be correct, I replied, shaking my head. I'm AA. My wife is Anne. That means our children must be too. The doctor looked at me and then at Daniel, who was lying on the hospital bed, tired but stable. We ran the test twice, he explained. The results are the same. For a moment, my mind refused to comprehend what he was saying. I wasn't a doctor, but I did understand basic biology. Two AA parents cannot have the same child. It simply doesn't happen. Could you please check again? I heard myself say, my voice becoming unsteady. The doctor sighed and nodded. We can run another test, but I assure you that this result is correct. So they did. Another vial of blood. Another hour spent waiting. Another period of time in which I tried to persuade myself that there was a mistake. A mix-up, possibly even faulty equipment. But the results were exactly the same. Daniel was as I stared at my son. His small fingers gripped the edge of the hospital blanket, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. The doctor must have noticed the expression on my face because he spoke again. His tone was careful. Would you like us to test your daughter, as well? I nodded, barely able to communicate. Ella would explain if there was a mistake, a mix-up, or testing. Another test, another round of waiting. My mind was racing through every possibility. What was the result? Ella was AA. I should have been relieved, but instead I felt uneasy. Why was Daniel different? I tried to come up with logical explanations, but no matter how hard I tried, one thought kept repeating itself in my head. Like an unstoppable whisper. Check everything. I sat in the hospital waiting room. The seconds dragged on like hours. My hands were clammy, gripping my knees as I tried to catch my breath. I had already told the doctor to go ahead with the DNA test, but now I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the results. There was still a small part of me that hoped I was exaggerating, that this was all a medical misunderstanding that could be explained away. I did not tell Jane what I was doing. She was still at work. When the nurse finally approached me, holding a sealed envelope, she handed it to me with a neutral expression, as if she had no idea she was delivering the death penalty. Here are the results, sir. I took the envelope, ripped it open, and unfolded the paper inside. Then everything came to a stop. 0% paternity match. I blinked, my vision blurred. I read it again, wondering if I had misread something, but it was clear. Neither Daniel nor Ella was mine. I was heartbroken. I took a deep breath before calling Jane's number. The phone rang only twice before she answered. Hey, babe, she said, her voice bright but distracted, probably still sitting at her desk. My voice remained even and controlled. There has been a medical emergency. I'm at the hospital with the children. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. What happened? Is this Daniel? What is wrong? Her words came out quickly, panic already setting in. He collapsed. They're running tests, but he's stable now. I am leaving work right now, she announced without hesitation. I will get there as soon as I can. And that was it. I hung up before I could say anything else, because if I had stayed on the line any longer, I would have said the wrong thing. My voice would have cracked, and my breathing would have revealed just how broken I was inside. I sat in the hospital waiting room, staring at the black screen on my phone. All I felt was numbness. She arrived in just under 40 minutes, rushing into the waiting room, as if she had run the entire distance from a parking lot. Her gaze darted around until it found me. Then she exhaled, relief spreading across her face as she saw Daniel respond to treatment. What happened? How's he doing? She asked. The doctor has just released him, I said, my voice calm and detached. He is now stable. He's fine. Jane's shoulders sagged with relief. She covered her face with her hands for a moment to process the news before returning her gaze to me. God, I was scared, she whispered. Let us take him home. I nodded. No emotion, no reaction. She had no idea that the man sitting next to her was not the same as the one she had met that morning. By the time we arrived home, Daniel had fallen asleep in the back seat, his head resting on Ella's shoulder. Jane was still whispering prayers under her breath, thanking God that he was safe. I drove into the driveway and put the car in park, but I did not move. Jane unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face me. Are you coming? I shake my head. I only need a minute. She hesitated but did not push. She carefully drew Daniel into her arms as Ella followed her. I watched as they disappeared into the house. The front door clicked closed behind them. And then I lost it. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my chest heaved, and before I could stop myself, the first sob burst forth, then another, and another. I cried like a man who had just lost everything after years of lying. I'm not sure how long I sat there, maybe minutes or hours. But when I finally got myself together, I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and exited the car. It was time to confront my wife. When I entered the house, the kids were already asleep. Jane was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she rinsed a plate in the sink. I did not start with small talk. I put the envelope on the dining table. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calmer than my emotions. She turned around and wiped her hands with a towel. Her eyebrows were drawn in, indicating mild concern. "What is it?" she asked. I swallowed hard and stared at her. I had the kids tested at the hospital. I referred to their genotype. Her face did not change. "Okay," she said in a light tone, but I noticed how she straightened her posture slightly, as if to brace herself. I took a breath. Daniel was as she blinked. "What?" he asked Jane. My voice remained steady, but I could hear the strain in it. "That is impossible. Right? Because we are both AA." Her eyes darted to the side for a brief moment. "That does not make sense. Perhaps there was an error." I gave a short, bitter laugh. "That's what I thought, too. So I asked them to run the test again. The same result." She frowned. "I do not understand, Thomas. What exactly are you trying to say?" I could feel my pulse quicken. "I took a DNA test," I said with a tight voice for both of them. Everything ceased. She just stood there, frozen, her expression unreadable. I reached for the envelope, took out the papers, and slammed them onto the table. Her body jerked in response to the sound. Her hands trembled as she took up the documents. I watched her eyes move across the words. Her lips formed a silent gasp. She then broke a choke. Sob escaped from your lips. "Thomas, please." Her voice cracked just above a whisper. I said nothing. I simply stared at her. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she reached for me, but I stepped away. "I am sorry," she said quietly, shaking her head quickly. "I swear I'm sore." She sobbed harder, covering her mouth as if that would muffle the sound. "I love you, Thomas. I swear I love you. You don't lie to your loved ones," I said. "You don't allow them to live the fantasy while you carry the truth." She kept crying and pleading. But I was finished. There was nothing she could say to make things better. I just turned around, walked past her, and went to the guest room. The house didn't feel like home anymore. The following few days were pure torture. Jane moved cautiously around me, her voice soft and her steps hesitant. She tried to act normal, as if nothing had happened. However, nothing she said or did could change this. She began cooking my favorite meals: jollof rice and perfectly fried plantains. Spicy goats prepare grilled fish just the way I like. The house had a comforting, loving aroma, but it just made me sick. How can you eat when your stomach is full of betrayal? At night, she'd knock on the guest room door. "Thomas." She would whisper, "Please talk to me," but I never responded. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long she had watched me love those kids despite the fact that they weren't mine. And then came the worst part: Daniel and Ella. I still tucked them in each night. Still listened to their stories about their day and kissed their foreheads. They did not deserve any of this. They were innocent. But each time I looked at them, my heart broke again. A week has passed. A week of silent meals to facilitate small talk and fake smiles for the children. Jane spent a week trying, hoping, and praying for me to change my mind. I could not. One evening, I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, staring at my suitcase. I wasn't angry anymore. I stood up and grabbed the suitcase, moving quickly now. A couple of shirts, a few pairs of jeans, my laptop, and the necessities. I wasn't even sure where I was headed. I knew I could not stay. Before I left, I went to the dining table, took out a sheet of paper, and wrote the only thing I could think of. I can't do it. I love the kids, but our entire life was based on a lie. I need to go. I left a note where she would see it, and took one final look around. I turned off my phone, picked up my car keys, and walked out. I did not look back. The next morning, I was at work, trying to keep my head down and concentrate. Jane arrived shortly before lunchtime. I stood up as she rushed towards me. Her face was streaked with tears, as if she hadn't taken the time to prepare before coming here. People were starting to stare, but she didn't mind. "Please, Thomas," she choked out. "Come home. This is something we can fix." "We need to fix this, Jane." "There is nothing to fix." My voice remained steady, but inside I was crumbling. "What am I supposed to tell the children?" she pleaded, her voice cracking. "They are asking for you. They don't understand why you aren't home." I exhaled sharply. "That is your problem right now," I said, my tone cold and detached. "You should have considered that before. You lied to me for 12 years. She shook her head violently and moved closer, her hands reaching for mine. But I pulled back. "It was not supposed to be like this." She sobbed. "I apologize. Things will never be the same." I told her, my voice was firm. "I can never trust you again." She gasped, as if I'd hit her. More tears flowed, but they did not move me. I'd spent the last week in agony, while she had spent 12 years keeping secrets. I took a step back. Hello, Jane. I turned and walked away. A few days later, the divorce papers were delivered to her. Just like that. The life I thought I had was over. So, what did I learn first? Trust, but verify. We like to believe that love entails never questioning those closest to us. But this is not true. If you love someone, you must trust them. Yes. However, trust should be earned and maintained, not blindly given. I never doubted my wife. I never thought to check things for myself. I assumed the kids were mine because they addressed me as dad. But I was mistaken. And that assumption cost me 12 years of my life. Never make assumptions. Ask. Check. No. Second love is not sufficient. We are told that love can conquer all. That as long as two people love each other, they can overcome anything. That is a lie. Love without honesty is merely an illusion. It's like constructing a house on sand. It may stand for a while, but eventually it will collapse. I adored Jane. I adored our family, but love couldn't undo what she did. Love could not change the fact that she had looked me in the eyes for over a decade. They never told me the truth. If love is genuine, it includes honesty, respect, and trust. Without those elements, it is meaningless. Finally, healing requires time. I won't lie and tell you that I'm completely over it. I still think about the children. I'm still wondering if I made the right decision. I still wake up some nights feeling as if I am trapped in a nightmare. But I also understand that some wounds are too deep to simply patch up and move on. Some things cannot be fixed, and that is okay. Some betrayals are too serious to forgive. Some people do not deserve another chance, and sometimes walking away is the only way to truly heal. So now I'll ask you, what would you have done if you were me? Would you have stayed if you knew the life you had built was based on a lie? Would you have forgiven her? Would you have tried to fix things for the sake of the children? Or would you have walked away, as I did? Here's the next story. It began 20 years ago, when the last of our little quartet bought their house. Every Christmas Eve, we would take turns hosting, eating a large meal, drinking, playing games, and opening presents with our small group of 8. Do you know my friend? They were at the Barbie event you went to last summer. Zeb. Now he is married to Kelly. Yep. The tallest blonde. Your smirk says everything. Then there is Harp. Jill is his missus. You met Grouch at football. Tall black man and his beautiful mistress. She has to have the longest legs around town. Then, of course, my cheek. But, hey, you know me. We work in the same office building. Do you like the rest of the wolves there? No. I'm married to the real-life redhead Jessica Rabbit. Sabrina. What is that? The odd names. We discovered them years ago while playing Sunday League football. It started out as a zip, because he was constantly playing with a cigarette lighter. But everyone assumed we were calling him up. So it stuck. Harp. Every time he got close to the goal, he'd fall at the slightest touch and focus on it. It was a penalty. Grouch. Quite obvious. Chris has always worn the shortest skirts, so wouldn't you be annoyed if every man ogled your other half's legs? And me? I loved my trendy clothes, so I chose the name Chic. You're wondering how we all married such beautiful women, and managed to keep them. That is why you must listen. Because I and my friends did not listen until it was too late. Let me continue with this sorry tale. So, for years, we've held our Christmas party. We usually buy some nice gifts and something fun for each other to open. This year, the girls gave me and the boys gifts from each of them, which we opened together. We looked at each other, and then burst out laughing. They brought us each a 6-month membership to the local health club. The brochure featured all of the really fit and healthy people doing what they enjoy. Keep it that way. Are they going to use a photo of a fat man in his 40s sweating profusely as an advertisement? Of course they aren't. The girls were not amused that we found the idea of going to a health club hilarious. They made jokes about spare tires. They were supposed to be in the trunk of the car, not carried around our waists. Blah blah blah, and rambled on about how we were letting ourselves go. We honestly assumed it was all a joke at our expense. Now, as boys, our heads were screwed on. What woman doesn't enjoy receiving some lovely lingerie for Christmas? However, this year was different. The girls rolled their eyes. We always pulled pranks like this. However, in retrospect, I believe they were unimpressed for the first time ever. Now it's Christmas. Well, it is Christmas. I did what most people do. I returned to our long-forgotten ancestral way of life. I also foraged for tins of biscuits, mince pies, chocolate tubs, Christmas cake, all kinds of weird and wonderful cheese, truffles, pickled onions, hot and cold meats, sweets, and, of course, beer. And to top it off, More beer. It's a God-given right to eat like that over the Christmas holiday. Did it bother me if I gained a few extra pounds? No. It always seemed to fade away during the first few months after Christmas. To be honest, as I grew older, an odd pound may have taken up residence in my body for more than a few months. And now it appeared that approximately 5 of the cheeky buggers overstayed their welcome each year after Christmas. Oh well, even they have the right to a good home, right? The girls moaned and whined about us, because they were all asterisks talking about how hard they worked to stay in shape for us. They had all gained a few pounds over time, particularly after having children. Mind you, it was never cheap. They were always up to date on the latest fitness craze, whether it was taking classes or purchasing fitness gadgets galore. Left, right, and center. Zumba, Zumba. Thighmaster, Prancer-sized jazz shake. Weight. Turbo. Body blade. Slender tone. Aqua something or another. They tried everything until they decided on a gym membership a few years ago. They all still run like clockwork to this day. Oh my God. The thought of them in the gyms gives me palpitations. Give me a second to calm down. They basically nagged us to start going. Then Grouch discovered something with a bar, which meant we could have an extra night of drinking. But everything went downhill quickly. Jill asked Harp how many reps he was doing in the gym. As a salesman, he got into a tizzy with Jill. He told her that he was not gay. He had no idea if there were any gay reps at the gym, so they had a bit of a Barney. He was a little embarrassed when he realized she meant repetitions, as in exercise, not reps as in sales representative. That ended a bonus night of drinking news. Then the love stuff began. I came home from work one day, and Sabrina wasn't in the kitchen, where I expected her to be preparing dinner. I called her, and she did not answer. So I started going upstairs. Halfway up, I heard her quietly conversing with someone in our bedroom. I crept the rest of the way up the stairs and stood outside. She was talking about taking it easy, because it was his first time. She'd show him the ropes, what she likes, and he wasn't supposed to be shy. She knew he'd be able to last for hours. Unlike her husband. I gently nudged open the door. She had pulled the covers over herself and her lover. I was angry, so I crept up and yanked the cover off the bed. She was dressed on her own and talking to a toy. She said, "Hello, mate. He is here to help." Where? Nowadays, you get out of breath quickly in the sack. As you can imagine, I was not impressed. Stomped downstairs, grabbed my coat, and stormed out to the pub. Well, I made it halfway. Then I was out of breath and had to stop. But I was lucky because I was catching my breath. Zap arrived in a taxi and gave me a lift for the final quarter mile. Of course, the 4 of us showed up, and we were all embarrassed in the same way. I'm not sure why, but Grouch kept going on about Chris's toys. We brainstormed, and Harp came up with an idea. If we booked ourselves into a health farm with extras for a week, they might cut short the game they intended to play. If they believe we are being serious. Of course, we played our own game. Oh, we found somewhere. A 5-star spa and health resort that happened to have the extras we were looking for, including a highly rated golf course. All we had to do was drop our clubs off at the pub a few days before, pick them up when we left home to drive there, and bingo. After a week of beer and top-notch golf, the ladies thought we were working our asses off to lose weight. Zeb found these tummy busters for men that we could wear home to make it appear as if we had given some extra luggage. The heave-ho during the week reminded me of women's corsets. I got them off. Even so, we hoped the plan would be a win-win situation. So off we went. At the hotel, we met this guy named Toby. Some sort of high-flying solicitor in London. We thought he looked like a shady car salesman. He was also a big bloke. Looking back, he was large. As in, he was muscular, not fat like us, despite his size. The women seemed to gather around him like flies to show off his tea. They threw themselves at him on Friday night. This group consists primarily of middle-aged women. They all seemed reasonable, but not as good as our wives back home. Old Toby joined us for golf on Saturday, and we offered to be his Saturday night wingman if he was going to hang out with a group of women who had been all over him. Friday. Please don't misunderstand. We didn't want to do anything inappropriate with them other than dance, drink, and enjoy some female company in the evening. None of us are cheaters. I do not think we would ever leave our girls. Toby revealed that he had some prime pieces signed, sealed, and ready to deliver after dinner Saturday. So we were on our own. So on Saturday, we went back to the golf course, and in the evening, we watched this stunning goddess of a woman rocker eat dinner with Toby. Then they vanished. Perhaps he was collecting on his special delivery. We could get a few dances with women who couldn't compare to our girls back home. We had a few more drinks and looked across at the hyenas dressed as women. They cackled and drank. I drew the short straw and was first up. I took a deep breath, tucked my stomach in, and sauntered over. I asked if any of them wanted to dance, and they burst out laughing as I walked away. There was some snarky commentary about bouncy castles not being listed as an activity. I understood exactly what they were implying about me. When the other boys found out what kind of reception I'd received, they decided not to go over. So we did what we do best, drank more beer by the time we got home. The girls were delighted to see us but wondered if we were ill. We returned red-faced and sweaty, short of breath and unable to sit down before leaving the hotel. We'd helped each other get into those corsets. And I swear all they did was cut off circulation from the top to the bottom of our bodies. The girls were impressed that we appeared to have lost weight. But it all fell apart when we all requested an asterisk dressed in the dark. We hadn't fully considered it before going to bed later that evening. Not one of us ever received an asterisk. Asterisk dressed in darkness. Our deception failed miserably. To say the girls were pie would be an understatement. It wasn't long until the highlight of the year arrived. The FA Cup is on Saturday. I believe the Yankees approached the Super Bowl in the same way. It was a big day for the London Derby, and as Gooners, we knew Arsenal would beat Tottenham. Let's face it, they always do. It was my turn to host. I got several cases of beer, snacks galore, and because the weather was supposed to be nice, I got a lot of meat to barbecue. We began at 11 a.m., and were already on their way to being hammered before the match began. At 3 p.m., it was a fantastic game that ended 1 minute into penalty time when we stuffed one in the back of the net. We went crazy jumping around, launching beer, snacks, chicken wings, ribs, plates, you name it. If it was close to us, it flew. When we stopped crying tears of joy, we realized the game was in the back. I looked around at the carnage we had caused. Crispy ribs, chicken wings, and knocked over beer cans. This was not going to go well if the girls saw it. They'd all gone out to the shopping mall, knowing we'd all get it. We drunkenly chipped in to make it square. I was on my hands and knees, attempting to pick up chicken wings and ribs. When the girls entered the room, we walked onto the carpet. Yes, they were unimpressed. All right. I puffed and panted as I attempted to get up. Do you know what the asterisks meant? She said that was exactly how I sounded these days while performing my husband duties. Sorry. Or, more specifically, tried to make the clowns laugh, because they thought it was funny. Once, the girls joined in with a verbal assault on them, for their own recent lack of love. Your abilities are also impressive. They felt as small as me as they walked out of the room. I told the boys not to be bothered. They were pie, as the asterisk indicated. So, what would they do? They'd still love us no matter how much weight we'd gained, or how out of shape we were. We got it. I told them they wouldn't think of going anywhere else because we were married, and we had all discussed on multiple occasions how none of us tolerated cheaters. Nobody intended to leave. If anything, the girls had pushed it, so I told the boys to be calm. Nothing was about to happen. It turned out I was completely wrong. I had no idea Sabrina had gone and picked up the vacuum cleaner. When I finished my little speech to the boys, I stood outside the door listening. After I finished, she walked in and nearly threw the damn thing at me. A few days later, I returned home from work to find no dinner on the table, but I could hear them upstairs. I recognized her voice. She was ducking somebody and moaning loudly. I ran, or rather walked, upstairs quickly. I almost kicked the door off its hinges, but I was out of breath and couldn't lift my leg high enough. So it sorted and gently opened. She was sitting on her bed, watching TV on the wall. She was playing a movie I had recorded a few years ago when I first got my iPhone. Being a typical bloke, the first thing I wanted to do was take some homemade photos of myself and her. She had logged onto the cloud and was viewing a movie from 10 years ago. I must admit, I was impressed. She was taking it big. She asked if I remembered it, and I replied, of course. She looked sad and stated that she wanted that man back. That is all she wanted again. I was not impressed with her attack on my ego and stormed out of the pub. This time, I had to catch my breath at the end of the drive, but luckily, Harp and Crouch arrived in the taxi. The girls seemed to have orchestrated another attack on our manliness. After a double burger, double fries, and plenty of beer to calm us down, it was time to take action. We all agreed to go to the gym Saturday morning without telling them. On Saturday, I told Sabrina that I was going to play golf with the boys and then left. We met at the burger van in the business park, and after a great breakfast, Bap took one car. It was a sobering wake-up call, because the gym's parking lot isn't the largest. I can tell you that we were given a guided tour, and it was mostly full of young men, fueled by an excess of testosterone, working out like crazy. We all jumped on the treadmill and began with a brisk walk, but had to slow down in less than a minute. Harp ended up pushing the button to speed it up rather than down. which added to our collective embarrassment as he fell and was spat off the back of the machine into a heap on the floor. We knew it was a sign from the guards that overweight men in their 40s did not belong in the gym. We headed to the bar and ordered some beers before leaving. We looked through the window into the main gymnasium. There were some real beauties operating the machines. We couldn't see them because the testosterone-fueled gym junkies appeared to have gravitated to and around the machines they were using. Then we noticed which women were laughing and flirting with these guys. Our 4 wives. That is when the depression set in. So we went back up to the bar for some more beer. The girls figured it out and realized we had gone to the gym. The gym bunnies told them about 4 overweight, sweaty guys in their 40s who spent only 5 minutes in the gym before one was kicked off a treadmill, and they all skulked off to the bar. We usually meet up after work on Fridays for a few beers before heading home to a well-deserved dinner. After 1 week of work, on Friday, however, there was no dinner. I thought this was another stupid game. I went upstairs, and she was dressed to the nines in a short black dress, as if she was going on a date with Sabrina. My phone was pinging with messages as I walked up the stairs, but I ignored them until I saw Sabrina. A quick scan of those messages revealed she wasn't the only one getting dolled up. I asked her what was going on. Her response was that because we like to go out for a drink after work on Fridays, the girls would eventually start going out as well, leaving us to fend for ourselves on Friday evenings. Of course, I would be tortured and complain about it. She said it wasn't a problem. She would stay in if I agreed. No more drinking sessions with the boys. No, I could not do that. It was sacrilegious. She couldn't expect this to stop. And that was it. She left with the other 3 wives. Obviously, we were all suspicious. We looked for hidden new lingerie, underwear for telltale stains from an affair, sniffing them when they returned home for unknown blokes' perfumes, and keeping an eye out for anything indicating they were going out. There were no signs of it, but they upped the ante by going out midweek as well, and they were returning later and later. Then something happened. The first crushing blow struck me like a bullet through the heart. She began to spend a significant amount of time looking at her phone. The girls were constantly chatting and messaging, but it felt more intense than usual. When she left the room, I thought I'd check her messages. The phone was always pin-coded. She'd had a telephone. She had never worn a coat. Now I was very suspicious. A little later, we were watching TV when her phone rang. Instead of answering it, she said she was going to make a cup of tea and took her phone with her, answering it as she exited the room. No, it wasn't right. So I slipped out into the hall and listened just outside the kitchen. I couldn't hear the other voice, but I assumed it was male. She was acting like a little schoolgirl, giggling and laughing. She had a low voice, so I couldn't hear what she was saying. Then I heard what no husband wants to hear. She will be there, wherever it was on Friday, at 9 p.m. She would come dressed to impress. Her final words were, "See you Friday, big boy." Panic set in. I considered confronting her but decided to proceed with caution. I had to know who this fucker was. When she returned with a cup of tea, I sat down in front of the television. I casually asked who had called, and she said it was Kelly, telling her that she had gotten them some free concert tickets from work. They were desperate to go, and she had booked 2 hotel rooms for the girls. I tried to wiggle and get her to stop, but she said it would only happen if I gave up my golf weekends away. Of course, I was not going to ignore them. I made excuses and spoke with the guys. We had an emergency meeting down at the pub that night. This time, I ordered an Uber. Instead of walking the mile to the pub, I exited through the front door. It turned out they had all met a similar fate. Each of the women appeared to be in a relationship with someone. We had no idea how far they'd gone down the slippery slope of infidelity. It may be too late to save our marriages anyway. We had an extra couple of pints and a couple of pickled eggs to help alleviate the depression that had set in. But we had a plan. We'd all follow our wives on Friday. They were probably all going to the same place, so even if one of them lost their wife, the other 3 would still have a tail on them. Then we could confront those caught in the act. Back at home, we all began to look at ourselves. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a man with a beer belly that could pass as pregnant. I was starting to see the error in our ways. As Friday approached, the women all appeared to be very happy and excited, whereas we all felt. We had an appointment with the hangman coming up. When I got home from work that fateful Friday, I hurried upstairs to see what Sabrina was wearing when I walked into the bedroom. She was just closing the special drawer where she kept all of her lingerie. Interestingly, she was wearing a long trench coat despite the fact that it was June. I asked why, and she said it was going to be colder late at night, and they might end up standing around for hours waiting for a taxi to take them back to their hotel after the concert. I looked at her while she spoke. Her hair was simply stunning, freshly styled with flawless makeup and a vibrant, glossy red lipstick. She explained that she would only wear it for me in our special play. Heartbroken, I was determined to put an end to it. Once I figured out where these treacherous blue asterisks were going, she told me she'd see me the next afternoon and would try to call me later that night. But Kelly had already warned her that the reception wasn't very good. She advised not to panic. All of the girls were in this together. Yes, right. I thought at the time. Anyway, Sabrina left, and I followed her car with mine. I'm not sure if she was aware or suspected that someone was following her, but she turned off the main road down side streets several times without signaling. She even did a few switchbacks down the same road twice. She must have thought she was good at losing me. It was just that I was better and more determined to get to the bottom of this. But it was a close call trying to keep track of her. She eventually pulled up at a service station, filled up the car with gas, and drove away while she paid. The news was bad. All of the others had lost track of their wives. Everything was now on my shoulders. She ended up driving into a multi-story car park and parking at the far end of the third floor. I parked at the opposite end as I entered, just to make sure she couldn't see me. It was pretty dark, but I recognized the other girls' cars. They all exited and got into Sabrina's car. Surprisingly, they were all wearing those silly trench coats. So I followed them as they drove out of town into one of the posh villages and down Predator Drive. She suddenly slowed down and pulled up to a gate. I quickly stopped the car a few hundred yards away and turned off the lights to watch. I got out and watched Sabrina's car pass through the gates as the other boys arrived. I'd been speaking with them in a group car as I traveled. They pulled up behind me, and we walked as fast as we could to the gates. When we arrived, Sabrina had parked the car, and everyone was walking to this impressively large house. There were several cars parked, and it sounded like there was a party going on. As the girls approached the front door, men spilled out of the house. "Dodd, you have beer in your hand." We could all have used one at the time to calm our nerves. Then something happened. Our four worlds crashed down around us. There were about 20 guys who had emerged from the house. The girls gathered in a line. Then everyone dropped their coats to the ground, eliciting a huge cheer. Even from here, we could see they were only wearing shoes and stockings. We could only see their backs. But they kept cheering as the girls walked willingly into the house. The guys trailed behind them, cheering and whooping like it was FC Cup Day. We pressed the intercom buzzer and started shouting to be let in. The door to the house opened, and two large, muscled men in tuxedos walked up the driveway to the gate. We asked who they were. Apparently, they were Arnold and Claude. It was a private party. We began to shout and scream, and they opened one of the double gates. Then they both stepped up to the boundary. They said that if we got past them, we were welcome to attend the party. We tried, but it ended up looking like a scene from a very old slapstick comedy. Black and white silent films threw us around without a single hair out of place. We ended up returning to my house and starting to message the girls, telling them to get their asses to my place ASAP. They all arrived shortly after midnight, their trench coats securely fastened. They appeared happy and satisfied with themselves. We had agreed to lay into them, but Crouch burst into tears and begged Chris to change and start tomorrow. The next thing we knew, we were all crying. We didn't want to lose them, and would forgive them if they left their boyfriends. The girls looked at each other and asked the big question, why did we think they had boyfriends? For the next 10 minutes, we chatted away from overhearing the phone calls, following them, and attempting to gatecrash the party. They all denied attending a party, so I said prove it. Sabrina hurried us into the living room and inserted a USB stick into the television. It was security footage from earlier in the evening, when she entered the petrol station. It showed her paying for petrol. Then a woman dressed similarly to Sabrina appears in the shot. Sabrina handed her the car keys and walked out. The external camera captures her getting into Sabrina's car and driving away, quickly followed by my car in hot pursuit. It then displays a taxicab. Turn up and take Sabrina away. I'll admit, we were all perplexed. I told her that I nearly lost her while trying to follow her out of the house, where she kept taking sudden turns and even doubling back to shake me off. She then explained that she had driven the car as she normally does because she didn't want to lose me, and that she had taken her usual route to the multi-story car park. But it did not explain what had occurred. Then the truth emerged. The first thing they did was remove their coats. They all dressed modestly. They told us they'd reached their limit. Apparently, Zapp struggled in the bedroom for a few months due to his weight. Kelly stupidly mentioned it when she relaxed a little at a work drink, and her boss, Charlie, laid on the charm. Big style. He was an avid cyclist, so he was in great shape, attractive, and had the gift of gab. Kelly broke down at the gym one day with the other girls, telling her how difficult it is to want to be loved by your husband, who is unable to do so at the moment, and to say no to an attractive and attentive man who is pursuing you hard and relentlessly. Charlie was knocked off his bike several weeks ago by a slow-speed hit-and-run, breaking his leg and forcing him to miss work. I looked at Sabrina with a frown. I then understood where the scrape on the car's front wing had come from. They'd made a decision to act. If we continued, one of them would eventually crack and break their marriage vows with a man, even if we remained silent. So they tried various strategies to get us to react and do something positive. In the end, they realized there was only one option left: become 4 unfaithful wives. But that was the genius of their game plan. They did some research and discovered adultwork.com, a website where you could hire a hooker. They kept looking until they found 4 women who could be mistaken for body doubles from a short distance in low light. And then they switched roles. Arnold and Claude did own the large house. In fact, they owned the gym where we were members. They were actually a gay couple who were present when Kelly broke down. They were the ones who proposed the plan of making us believe they were unfaithful. The girls were not happy about stripping in front of the party guests, who were mostly young lads from the gym, so they used stand-ins from Adult Works. "Dad," I asked, "aren't hookers expensive?" I had no idea, having never used one, but I doubt it cost a $5 per hole. It was £1,000 for the 4 of them. But the girls received a message stating that they would receive 50% back because they had the added benefit of making some serious extra cash at the event. I tell you, mate, we all let out a sigh of relief. I looked at my watch, thinking we might be able to make it to a late one somewhere to celebrate. But the girls made it clear that the next time they would be going to a party. This is not for hookers. So, there you go. I'm a regular at the gym now, and I feel better because of it. But I didn't from the start. I've gotten my waist back to where it was 10 years ago, and I'm much more energetic. Oh, wait, it's the missus on the phone. Yep, sorry. I just saw a friend on my run. Just taking a quick 5-minute break. Really? Okay, I'll get there in 10. Sorry, mate, I need to leave. Apparently, the girls have discovered a new fitness fad called lover size. Amazon just delivered our copy, and the missus is eager to get started. As soon as I arrive home, do you remember what I said? Learn from our mistakes. Real-world version. I knew I was gaining weight. My missus, Sabrina, mentioned getting out of breath during a round of love. I couldn't go any further because I was out of breath. I felt embarrassed. She recommended I go to the gym. She implied that my 3 best friends' wives shared her feelings about them. I can't deny her. If you believe that we girls do not discuss such topics, you are mistaken. Mister. That was not your finest hour. Cheek. And that is my cheek. This is not my real name. It doesn't really matter because nobody calls me that anyway. What about the friends? My wife, Sabrina, mentioned it. They all ended up with the same nickname as me. It all started when we played Sunday league football in our late teens, and we've been friends ever since. They came up with the names Zap, Harp, and Grouch as a result of a Zippo lighter falling without provocation in the penalty area, and harping on about it even if it did not result in a penalty. I'm getting irritated because of all the comments about my girlfriend's extremely long legs because I like to dress smartly. So chic. Stuck. During those football years, we met the 4 women who would become our wives, and meant everything to each of us. Everyone said we were punching far above our weight within 3 years of meeting. I married Sabrina Zapp, Kelly Hart, and Jill, while Grouch married Chris. They were stunning then. But over time, a few extra pounds in the right places resulted in women who were loved and admired. It always felt special to have them on our arms. If we went out in the evening. As time passed, we boys became softer, rather than jobs that required us to burn physical calories. We moved to offices and middle management, and each of us began to feel the weight of the responsibility. The other thing we started doing was drinking more, especially when we had more time to socialize. Over the last year, my waist has grown 2 inches. We've always spent Christmas Eve together since we formed a group. We would take turns hosting, preparing a meal, serving plenty of drinks, and giving out Christmas presents. The girls forced us to open our gifts at the same time at our last gathering, and we were a little embarrassed to learn that each of us received a 6-month membership voucher to the local gym. We tried to make a joke about it, but when I looked at Sabrina, I realized it wasn't a joke. She wanted me to be serious about getting back in shape. They all brought us the same thing. It told us that this was a planned action that they felt they needed to take. I enjoy Christmas. It's time to eat, drink, and celebrate. They forgot to mention that as you got older, the saying should have been eat, drink, and be merry, resulting in a lot of weight gain. It felt as if some of the weight gained never shifted, and was simply added to each subsequent Christmas. We went to the gym after Christmas with the best of intentions, but failed miserably. It had a bar, so we immediately went there and started drinking, instead of exercising before heading home. Then cracks began to appear in our relationship. We had love. The next time I went out with the boys for a drink at the pub, I told them I needed to be serious about losing weight. I didn't tell them what had happened, but their slow nods and furrowed brows indicated that something similar was happening in both of our relationships. I informed them that I was going to the gym the next day. Please feel free to join me. The next day, during my lunch break, I went to the gym, changed, and stood outside the main gym entrance. I looked out the window and saw a group of testosterone-fueled young men conversing with a couple of extremely fit women using some of the fitness equipment. When they started shifting around, I realized one was Jill and the other was Sabrina, my wife. They were smiling and seemed happy as they talked to the young lads, who were clearly trying to flirt with them. The worst part was that they appeared to be enjoying the attention. I felt sick in my stomach. I couldn't go in there and embarrass myself in front of these muscular men. Feeling depressed, I went back to the dressing room, changed, and left to go home. I clearly had an issue. It was trying to figure out how to handle it. The big shock came as we approached May, the day of the FA Cup final. This was the highlight of our boys' year. We turned it into a beer and food party, in addition to the football. Even better, at 7 a.m., our club Arsenal faced our arch rivals Tottenham in the big London derby, and our world went to shambles. Sabrina's phone rang when we were in bed. She stood up and walked downstairs shortly after answering it. She told me 15 minutes later to get up, dress, and go to Graham's house rather than ZBZ's. Why did you call in Graham instead of zapping Sabrina? Because I've always known Zeb and Kelly. Kelly left Graham this morning. I apologize. I don't think I'll be able to call him Zap anymore. Unless we help to sort out this asterisk. You have to drive to his house. He is distraught and needs your help. The others are on their way, too. I'm going to see Kelly and the girls to see if this can be resolved. I went to his house, and he wasn't just upset. He was a shattered, broken man. We cried together. His sister had seen Kelly the previous lunchtime in the next town, eating dinner and kissing another man, and told him about it. The other man turned out to be Charlie, her boss. That night, he confronted her, which resulted in a furious row. Then she stormed away. She and Charlie had arrived just before 6 a.m. to collect some clothes and personal belongings. She wasn't staying with him, but he was just helping her. When I got home late in the afternoon, I felt shattered and empty. If Kelly gave up on Zeb, how long would it be before Sabrina gave up on me? And how about Harp and Grouch? I started feeling like we were all playing Russian roulette with our marriages. Zap and Kelly were the first to go out. Which couple will be next? Sabrina returned home later that day, looking very subdued. What's the verdict? Their marriage was in tatters. She had already broken her marriage vows a few weeks ago. I was horrified. Our neighbor cheated on his wife a few years ago, causing their relationship to implode. It became a topic of discussion among our 8-person group over the course of several weeks. Over dinner one night, we all agreed that we didn't have time for cheaters. So, what had gone horribly wrong for Zip and Kelly when we went to bed? We both opened up and discussed what we had learned. We agreed that whatever we discussed would never leave our bedroom. It turned out that Zep had not given me the full picture. His weight and lack of exercise had taken their toll on him, and he couldn't get it back. Kelly had begged him to discuss it with one of us boys if he couldn't talk to his doctor, but he refused. He bottled it up and did nothing to address it. Graham, Kelly's boss, had picked up on the problems at home and played the predator, sweet-talking and charming Kelly, until the inevitable occurred. I was horrified. Could I be next? Sabrina, how about us? You've made comments to me before. Surely you would not consider going elsewhere. She sat looking at me, thinking in silence for about 30 seconds. It didn't matter what words she used after the 30s. She could have told me she was an alien, because I never heard what she said. Those 30 seconds of silence were enough to tell me she was considering a way to say not yet. However, if nothing changes, I will consider it. She asked if I understood why they gave us the gym membership. Kelly was still struggling with the Zaps problem. The girls agreed among themselves. We'd begun to let ourselves go without effort. They believed that by tackling us as a group, the rot would be stopped. I had a bad night's sleep. I kept wondering what was going through Sabrina's mind during those 30 seconds of silence. I needed to take action and devise a viable strategy. The next day, I searched the internet for local personal trainers. I found a retired Army physical therapist who offered one-on-one fitness classes. I went over for a free 1-hour trial, and he explained what was required. He estimated that 6 months would put me in the physical condition that I should be in. My body was not the tired old man it is today. And so it began. I'd like to say that Graham, whom I can no longer refer to as Zep, and Kelly reconciled. They did not. Graham was forced to leave the house and eventually rented an apartment. But money was tight. Kelly moved back in because she was responsible for their teenage son. When the son left for university, her lover Charlie moved in, according to what we heard. When the divorce is finalized, they will marry. The girls still see Kelly, but we refuse to include Charlie in our group. It just felt disloyal to Graham. Graham struggled and eventually accepted a transfer to another part of his company, somewhere up north. The tragedy that befell Graham and Kelly jolted me, Grouch, and Harp into action. Within 3 months, we were regular gym goers, but chose a different one than the girls. I think I would have gotten into too many fights with the testosterone-fueled fools who kept trying it on Sabrina, not to mention the physical fitness. We all started paying attention to how much we drank, and decided to cut back significantly. We also began to follow some eating plans designed for guys like us, who had difficult habits to break. And it all started to work as my waistline began to shrink. My health began to improve significantly. I'm now getting into bed with Sabrina the same way I used to. We took a video of ourselves, and compared it to one we made 10 years earlier. I bought my first iPhone. I'm pleased to say that our lovemaking appears to have matured with age. It was a hard lesson to learn, but the cost for some was far too high. You've been warned. Take this story to its conclusion.